Starting. This is my favorite part because we opened the gates. And I always say this actually, but when we open the gates, I always picture a football team coming out of, to the stadium and running. Right now, this is what I'm picturing. There's already like 25 people. Hey, look at that, 25 people coming out. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Good morning, is that right? No, I think it's already afternoon for everybody. Hello, everybody. Oh my God, this is so exciting. We're gonna get started in just a minute here. If I was trying to figure out the music situation, but I don't know if that's something that's gonna work out. So before we get started, I would love to hear where everybody's calling in from. So put your cities on the chat, that would be great. Let's see, I wanna start reading some of them. San Mateo, Mountain View, yay. San Jose, Austin, Texas. Oakland, Virginia, Seattle. Oh, one of my favorite cities. I might be biased, but that's one of my favorite cities. I have a lot of friends that live over there. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I didn't figure out the music situation, so we're gonna have to do that for the next time. But let me share my screen really quickly so that we can see what's in store for today. Yay, awesome. All right, well, before we get started here and introduce everybody, I do wanna say a few words and thank you everybody for joining us. I'm so excited to welcome you to Creating Pathways at Adobe, Defining Your Career Path. As a way of introduction, I'm Cecilia Fisher Benitez. I'm a program manager here at Latinas in Tech. My pronouns are she and her and ella. And as I said earlier, please drop in your cities on the chat. I wanna know where everybody's coming from. I love New York, that's another thing. Canada, hey, Canada. Mexico was, someone said Mexico earlier, so. All right, before we begin, I want to say thank you to our sponsor, Adobe, and their entire team who collaborated with us on making this event happen. And of course, another huge thank you to you for making time to joining us from your home. If this is your first Latinas in Tech event, welcome. You're in great company and in for an awesome opportunity to connect with other Latinas and make those connections to grow your career. Okay, so I already got ahead of myself. I didn't even move the slide. All right, so at Latinas in Tech, our mission is to provide resources, opportunities, and community Latinas need in order to thrive and innovate and lead in tech. We do this by building programs and events focused on professional development, recruitment, and mentorship. We have a great community on Slack and Facebook, so if you're not part of it, we'll drop those links on the chat a little bit later. We also have a newly members only portal that you can surf and learn more about what we do and what we have, the opportunities that we have with our sponsors. But we're always looking to connect with people. You can join about 6,000 women already in that portal. So feel free to join us, it's free. Okay, so before we get started, I want to go through some housekeeping items. Just a reminder to use the Q&A button for any questions that you may have for the panelists, and make sure to also switch on your Zoom. There is an option to message hosts and panelists only, but there's also for everyone. So make sure you're on everyone so that others can see your comments. Okay, and before well, oh my God, I already said that so many times, words. Today is Thursday, we're almost there. All right, it is my pleasure to introduce you to our moderator for this evening, Amanda Lopez, Manager of Diversity Talent Acquisition at Adobe. So Amanda, please take it away, and I'm out of here.
Bienvenidas, welcome. I'm Amanda Lopez, coming from San Jose. And I've been at Adobe for about 3 years. As Ceci mentioned, I work with our diversity talent acquisition team, being able to really bring in as many folks into our company that we feel we can create opportunity for. So first and foremost, I think there's a lot of opportunity for folks here today, and I'm really excited to introduce you to our wonderful panel of folks. And really, we're going to cover about 5 to 6 questions, and then we're going to have the opportunity to open it up to the greater panel. So I'm going to go actually from left to right as far as introduction. So first I want to kick us off, Veronica.
Hi, everyone. My name is Veronica Luquin, and I am a first-generation Mexican-American. I am a daughter of farm worker parents, and I grew up in rural Northern California. I was the first in my family to graduate from college, and I studied marketing and graphic design at Cal State Fullerton. I post-college, I worked in advertising across a lot of exciting brands, but it was always a dream of mine to work at Adobe. I've been with Adobe for 3.5 years, and I currently lead global marketing for next-gen products.
Thanks, Veronica. Next up, we have Genesis.
Hi, everyone. My name is Genesis Giraldo. Genesis Giraldo, for saying it in Spanish. I grew up in Lawrence, Massachusetts, to a Colombian father and a Dominican mom. So have both South American and Caribbean Latin in me, which I could speak a ton about. But I grew up in Lawrence. I went to undergrad in Ohio as part of a Passy Foundation scholar. And so I attended Denison University. When I wrapped up undergrad, I started my career at Nielsen, the data company. They do CPG data as well as TV ratings. I spent about 5 years there before I started to really think about what I wanted to do long term. And I realized in talking to people that the people whose jobs I would want in 5 or 10 years, they had a thing in common, and that was business school. So I decided to go to business school full time for 2 years. And as I wrapped up that experience, I started at Adobe. So I've been at Adobe for about 2 years now. I started off as a product marketing manager and made a shift to product management last year.
Thank you for sharing. It's so awesome to see the variety and experiences, even just as we continue down the line. Next up, we have Yadira.
Hi, everyone. My name is Yadira Flores. I am currently based in San Francisco, but I grew up in the Central Valley, small town near Fresno, California. My parents were both immigrants from Mexico and worked in like the agricultural industry there. And then for my university, I attended UC Berkeley for my undergrad. And there I took my first computer science class ever, learned how to program, and fell in love with like engineering and software engineering specifically. Did a few internships during college, and then eventually was hired as a new grad software engineer at Adobe and been here ever since. So coming on 2 years now. And I work on Adobe XD, which is our UX design platform.
Thank you. I think, as you can see, folks have these extensive experiences, not only within their personal lives, but being able to look at just from a technical perspective, everybody has these kind of really unique paths on how they ended up in their current position. So I'd love if we could move from this slide to being able to see everybody's wonderful faces. So first off, as far as a question, I'll kick off, and I'll work towards the middle here. I'll kick it off with Genesis, but we'll open it up to the others as well. What's a lesson that you think you learned growing up that you currently implement?
Yeah, quite a few. I mean, I think I grew up being raised to respect and admire hard work. I think I saw both of my parents work very, very hard and long hours. And I think that looks a little different when you think about kind of corporate America, but I think a lot of the same foundational principles stand, which is if you put time into your work, if you put your dedication, if you try to do your best, that's something that will be reflected in your work. So I think while my day-to-day looks a bit different than what my parents spent their day doing, I think the notion of having pride in my work and wanting to stand behind it is something that I think through, and I kind of come back to regularly as I'm like, taking on different projects and pushing different features. I always kind of anchor it around this notion of trying to do my best.
Yeah, our other panelists, does anybody else echo that sentiment? I know I do, just knowing, and sometimes it can even work to our detriment.
Yeah.
Veronica?
Yeah, no, I definitely can agree with that. I think for me also, kind of an early lesson was about being an advocate for myself, because I remember, having parents that had very limited English and sometimes didn't like fully understand, either schoolwork or topics. And so I feel like early on I had to learn to really find my voice and speak up for myself and state what I needed. And I think that's a skill that I've really taken into, my overall life and what I do today.
Yeah, it's one of those managing stakeholders, if you will. You find yourselves a lot of the time as that go-between, where you're or at least for myself, you know, you translate for a parent, or you're always having to be able to code switch. And so that tool can come in really handy in corporate America. Yadira.
Yeah, I was going to say for me, something I learned was the importance of community and uplifting your own community, especially in like immigrant communities. Like I grew up in Central Valley, pretty big, like farm worker immigrant kind of community. I noticed like a lot of times people rely on each other to share like resources, knowledge, time, and just kind of band together. And I think that's something I took to me, especially like in Berkeley, like immediately try to find like my group, like my Latinas, my Hispanics and Latinos in tech and engineering specifically, and just also learning to not only give back, but also rely on people and reach out for help and that kind of thing is similar. Finding mentors like other Latinas in tech has been really valuable in my career.
No, and I think for folks that are just starting out their careers, it's really important to continue to build that sense of community. I know a lot of the times corporate America, you know, isn't necessarily made for the Latinx community. And so looking at these ways that we can create these organic connections too. So I'm going to actually go in reverse order this time with this next question. So we'll start with Yadira. What do you enjoy most about your job?
Yeah, so what I enjoy most about my job is really just the fact that I get to learn new things every day. I've been here for 2 years and still like every task I get, it's like a whole new thing to me. So just that is like really exciting. I've always been someone who like really enjoyed school and learning and expanding my skill set. So I definitely feel like Adobe like nourishes that and gives us opportunities to do that.
No, I completely agree. I think that I love that Adobe has given us a space to learn and grow and provides us with those tools or resources. I know we have the Latinx McKinsey Leadership Academy coming up here soon, which it will be a great tool for any folks that want to enroll. We'll kick it off to Veronica. Any lessons you'd like to share with us that you learned growing up?
Was the question more about lessons or covering what we enjoy about work today? I wanted to make sure because I think we answered that one.
What do you enjoy most about your job?
Okay, awesome. I just wanted to clarify that. I think for me, so I work on the marketing side, and the thing that drove me into advertising and ultimately marketing was really the ability to work with creative people and to be able to tell stories. I think that's something I'm really passionate about with my background, and I also have this curiosity about hearing the stories of others. So I think that's probably the biggest thing, is bringing ideas to life in the campaigns that we do for Adobe, and specifically in the new products that we're bringing out. I think also it's being able to work around some extremely smart and bright minds at Adobe, and just the diversity I think that we have at our company. I feel really lucky to say that I feel like we're at a company that has a large diversity of backgrounds. And so for me, it's the chance to bring it all together.
Now, Genesis, do you also find that the same, or can you describe a day in your life in your role?
Yeah, I mean, I think a day for me, it looks different day to day, but I think what I enjoy most about working in product is the challenge. One day it's a business challenge, right? Like, how are we positioning this? Like, how do our features compare? You know, like who do we want to be to the user? And then another day it's more of a technical issue around like, hey, this isn't going to work how we thought it would. Like, how are we pivoting? So I think for me, like what I enjoy most is the challenge. Doesn't always feel that way when you're like stressed and trying to like problem solve and you're trying to figure things out. But I think like at the end of the day, when the problem is solved and like you have that action plan, like it's a very satisfying feeling. And I'm someone that's driven by that. So I love the opportunity to constantly be challenged, constantly have to learn new things and grow. And I think, yeah, like the way that we do that at Adobe is by leveraging the diversity that we have in backgrounds, in technical backgrounds. We have folks here that have been here 2 years. We have folks that have been here 20 years. And I think when you put those perspectives in a room and you kind of hear, who Adobe is as a company and where we want to be as a company, I think it's always like really, really interesting, the conversations that come out of there.
No, I think that the challenge is what is the most exciting for a lot of us. To your point, in the thick of it, it's a struggle, it's a grind. But once you've accomplished it, you look back at it and say, wow, I did a really great thing. And I think another thing as a Latinx community that we sometimes don't do is because of that hard work component, a lot of the time we don't take credit for it. We say, oh, well, we're supposed to put our head down, we're supposed to work hard at this. And with a lot of our families, and I'll speak for my family specifically, it's just like, okay, that's expected of you. You're expected to do a good job. So how do we continue to look at how we can celebrate those types of things too? A lot of good comments in the chat pod. I don't know if you want to speak a little bit specifically, Yadira, about XD. We've got a comment about love and XD.
Yeah, so XDs are UX design platforms, so people can use it to like design websites and apps and all these kinds of cool things. I don't like specifically work on like the features within like the design app. I'm more on like the cloud doc management side of things. So just make sure people can open and close and delete their documents is kind of more like my role.
Not just, again, going back to giving yourself credit, you're doing a lot within that product. So thank you. Next up, for folks that are just getting started out in their career paths and building in that direction, what advice would you give somebody that wants to go into your profession? And I'll open this to the floor if somebody wants to kick us off.
I can kick us off because I do kind of get this question a lot. I think product is, I had a mentor that called it like the investment banking of the 2000s. Like a lot of people want to be product managers. I think it is a very cool role. I consider myself very lucky and blessed to be in it. But I think sometimes folks like are so ready to be a product manager that they aren't always necessarily willing to take alternative paths. And I think if you talk to people that work in product, you'll see some of them are former engineers, some are former designers, some are from business school like myself. Some have been working in tech for the last 20 years and have found themselves in product. So I think my piece of advice is always look at what the job description is asking for and talking to product managers, like what their day-to-day is like. Look at what experience you have and if there's any gaps that you can fill by joining as a QE analyst or joining as a PMM and building more of the business side of the role. Don't be afraid to take alternative paths. Like you may want that job now, but if it requires you kind of making your way into a company for 2 years and learning and kind of filling out a skill set that you don't yet have, like that's okay. And there's many ways to get into product. And so I always tell folks to not be afraid to take alternative paths and to think creatively. Sometimes getting your foot in the door is the hardest part, if I'm being honest, right? Like making it through recruitment and getting the opportunity. So find a company you're passionate for, a product that you'd love to work on, or a part of the business you'd love to work on, and then don't be afraid to give yourself a few years to work your way into product.
Veronica, I saw you nodding your head. I don't know if you want to speak a little to yours.
I was nodding along when Genesis was talking about just finding a place that you're passionate, like a company that you're passionate about. I think that for me has been something from the beginning, is to find either a company or place that I really believe in, or I believe like the mission or what they're striving for, because I think that's what brings like the excitement and the motivation, I guess, to your everyday job. And back to the idea of like taking different paths, some people, so specifically for marketing, some people might go directly to a company or a brand and start working there. Like my path was a bit different, where I actually started on the advertising agency side. But in doing that, I actually got a chance to work across a ton of different companies, from CPG to like insurance to ultimately tech and finance. And so I think being able to do that and learn about different brands and audiences and all that is really what helped strengthen my overall experience. And I'm able to now bring that into my focused role at Adobe.
That's a great tip, really focusing on expanding and seeing, oh, how can I add value to maybe multiple different companies versus, okay, I'm getting that training maybe at that smaller company before I decide to delve in the tech realm. I know a lot, I did that personally, and I think there's a lot of us that find, okay, I can maybe get a little more training or support as I build in that division. Yadira, anything you want to add?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff specific to like software engineering. Luckily, there's like a ton of great online resources, and a lot of them are free to just kind of get that initial exposure of like, well, you like coding, it's something you could see yourself doing. And then afterwards, I would see like a great suggestion is to join communities like Latinas in tech, or there's also Taqueria. And within that, I think like if I would to start fresh, I would want to like talk to either if you want to go the traditional route, like a college student, or talk to someone who's like in a boot camp, if you want to go like the boot camp route, and see if that's something like you can see in your life. And then, big advice is to stay within these communities, because within them you can find all tons of resources. And a lot of different companies offer kind of these like associate type of entry level engineering jobs. Even Adobe has their own digital academy for non-traditional folks to kind of enter tech. So there's a lot of great resources that I think are just kind of, you gotta do a lot of your own research, and being involved with these communities will kind of make that easier, because then the research kind of comes to you.
No, definitely. And you bring up a good point that somebody addressed in the chat pod. I want to make sure that we're not missing out on all of these questions, but and we'll have the time to open up for some of these other ones. But someone did ask, what do you recommend for somebody that got a degree outside of the tech field? And to your point, Adobe Digital Academy is a great program that we have for folks that maybe don't necessarily have that engineering degree, but maybe they've tried some courses online and said, hey, this is something that could be of interest to me. So that's a good pathway. Next up, I think that a lot of us have made different transitions. I know a lot of us are in the space of being in that kind of 2 to 3 year mark with Adobe. So I know that I myself have been blessed with getting the opportunity to transition throughout different teams or through different careers. Would love to learn from each of you kind of how you knew when it was the right time to make that type of career move. I know, Veronica, you talked about making the career move from kind of agency to coming to a tech company, but would love to pick each of your brains. So I don't know if you want to kick us off.
Yeah, I can definitely jump in. I think as far as career move and like upward movement, I think it's important to be able to establish and like look for those opportunities and just make sure that you're constantly being challenged. I think one thing that I do a lot is I kind of like map out goals that I want to achieve for that month or that quarter, and just kind of think about longer term. And sometimes you find that type of like movement or opportunity within the company, like whether it's an opportunity to maybe move to another role, as Yadira mentioned, but otherwise, I think if you're not quite finding that, it is important to, I guess, push outside of that and look for opportunities elsewhere, and just make sure that you're constantly being challenged.
Yeah, I think what's really important about what you said is being able to develop your own pathway and being really declaring, hey, this is what's of interest to me. How am I going to build in that direction? And if this particular team or particular role doesn't support it, how can I create those types of job opportunities moving forward? And how do I get the recognition that I am doing these different types of things? I think one thing that I've heard from volunteering with a couple of different organizations within outside Adobe is folks might say, oh, well, what I have doesn't exist here. And they don't challenge themselves to say like, okay, well, what happens if I could wave my magic wand and make that job happen? So being able to build in that right direction. I don't, Yadira, do you want to maybe speak to what that looks like from a computer science perspective? Because I know that that's a little different.
Yeah, I've been at the same role kind of since I started, so I haven't made my own like career moves, but typically like as you're moving up, like
even the career move of deciding to go into computer science.
Oh yeah, I guess like for deciding to go into it, it was just curiosity into like what is coding, like how does it work, like how do these websites work, and just was kind of, I took it as like an elective, it wasn't even like a credit course, and just from there I was like, this is so much fun, like I really enjoyed all the projects and just wanted to kept going into more. And then to touch on like corporate, like moving up, once you're in this role, it kind of will usually take the position of like either you take a more like computer science like lead, so more of like designing architecture and all these like kind of complicated features, or you can go kind of more like the managerial route that a lot of people do. So something that I'm more interested in is, I would say, like the managerial route, like potentially going into that kind of side of things. So then for transitioning, like you have to start thinking of different skills you have to develop, like leadership, speaking, people management, that kind of thing. So it's something that I'm like barely kind of starting to touch the iceberg on.
No, but it's so important to just be naturally curious, because I think that curiosity creates opportunity. Back to kind of what Genesis was saying about identifying some of those problems, a lot of those, by identifying a problem and creating a way to solve it, a lot of the time we create those opportunities or those new jobs for ourselves. Genesis, anything that you'd like to add on this one?
I mean, I think just quickly, the only thing I would add is that don't be afraid of like lateral moves or like a lot of these companies are fairly matrix. There's so many different variations to any given role that I found that like, you know, I started at Adobe as a product marketing manager, and after a year, it just wasn't right for me, but I wasn't afraid to kind of make a lateral move into product management and like try something completely different. So I think like part of the right time is also just realizing like what's the right position for that time. And yes, of course, you can continue to track on more of your 5-10 year goals and where you want to be professionally. But I think for me, once I'm not growing or I'm not really challenged in a role, I think that's where I start to think like, what am I missing? Is it that I want to learn a new skill set? Is it that I want more like the same work, but in a more challenging capacity, and then just find the right opportunity for that?
Now, I know you talked a little bit about kind of asking and trying that lateral opportunity. How do you think that you can ask for what you need from your employer? Like, how do you articulate it, and where did you find that motivation?
Yeah, I think it was Veronica that mentioned like advocating for yourself. Like it took me 10 years to learn how to have those conversations. So if you're early on in your career, like give yourself grace, like learn it as soon as you can, but like, you know, if you can't do it the first or second time you try, like it's okay. It's a skill I've personally had to learn. But I think for me, I always frame it as, hey, like I'm in this role, I'm on your team, I'm contributing. If I were able to develop X skill or learn how to do this part of the business, this is how I can translate it into my current role. This is how it can impact our work as a team. And so I think I always kind of frame anytime I'm looking for like, you know, whether I'm looking for a side project where I can spend 10% of my time, or I'm kind of asking to expand my own scope within my team, I always kind of frame it as this is the impact it'll have to my day-to-day, to our team, to our goals. And I think that's a good way to kind of get your manager on board. It's a little, right, like I'm selling it. I'm kind of giving them the benefit that they can receive. I think it'd be great if you can just go to your manager and say like, hey, I may not want to be here in a year, so I want to like build X skill set, you know, for the next opportunity. But I think, you know, not every manager employee relationship is like that. So I think be transparent, but also make sure that there's something you can bring back to the team that'll incentivize them to kind of give you that leeway.
No, that brings me back to a question that's in the chat pod. So you mentioned, you know, looking at outside to community and looking at other folks that can be able to help you have those conversations as you're in the process of learning to generate buy-in, maybe with your direct manager. What kind of mentorship have you received at Adobe, you know, if any, and what did that look like? And I will let somebody decide to kick this one off.
I can just kick this one off. I think I received like more like informal mentorship in like a lot of different ways. Specifically, like people on my team were just kind of helping me navigate like XD and like that kind of stuff. And then also people within our ERG, like Ola, have just been able to answer kind of like wider Adobe questions for me. And like through that, like I remember there was a girl on my team she was a new grad hire like the year before me. So really close in age and kind of experiences. And like she like really helped me kind of just navigate like just the structure of how like this corporate lifestyle works. I'm like was not really familiar with it. Like I didn't really know how to talk to my manager, like what is expected of these kind of things, like what is expected out of me in these roles, like little things from just like how long should I be in this office for? Like there's not really a set time. Just kind of those questions that you don't really think are going to come up, but are important to just kind of just have someone to bounce off of, like just day-to-day stuff.
Yeah, I think what's so important is being able to establish those norms, and by utilizing your mentors to help you really guide through those. And then also looking at how we can continue to give back. I know for myself in my own journey, without some of those mentors or without finding Ola on day one, I don't know if I would be here today. So I don't know if Veronica and Genesis want to have anything to add.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think sometimes just earlier that those mentors or that kind of those resources come from definitely outside of your group or in unexpected places. Like I remember in my early days at Adobe, also having to learn a lot of like the corporate speak or all the acronyms or all those things. And I think it's just seeking out those people that are willing to give the time or help with that. I remember having someone in early days do like whiteboard sessions with me about kind of like background or how I could approach things. And I found that so helpful. And then I think it's something that in turn I try to do for other new people as well. So I think it kind of creates this cycle of people helping each other.
Yeah, and that goes back to the bigger overall theme of community. You know, folks, it's almost like you get mentored, you're like, how can I give back and get a mentee? And that way we can continue that cycle and continue to build that. Genesis, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I mean, I echo that. I think I've had a lot of kind of like peer mentorship, especially like when I did switch functions over to product. I think I was able to rely on a lot of people that actually started Adobe at the same time I did, but they happened to start in product, and I was able to kind of leverage a lot of their like early learnings. I think in terms of like mentorship in the more formal sense, I think that's still something I'm trying to get my footing on when it comes to like finding that relationship within Adobe. And so I feel like that's something personally, as someone who, when I think more about the 5 to 10 year plan, I definitely want to make sure that I'm having the right conversations in terms of like how I should be thinking about my career in the longer term. But I mean, I made it a priority for me this year, and I still have 4 months. So I think, I can still squeeze it in, but definitely still trying to kind of figure out what that more maybe formal, for lack of a better word, mentorship dynamic is like.
Yeah, I know with mentorship, it's something that can be used really loosely. It could be as simple as, hey, this person's helping me out on this particular project versus, hey, this person's helping me career map for what is my journey to a director look like and beyond. So really, making sure that we're finding those right allies. And unfortunately, that community isn't large at every company. So continuing to be able to navigate that as well. Well, another good question that came up in the chat pod is, what is something that you learned from your familia or cultura that has helped you in your current role? You want to start off with Yadira?
Trying to think back to all like the talks my mom gave me, like which one has been the most relevant. I guess one that they always instilled in me, I was kind of like more of a quiet, like timid child. So my dad especially was always like an advocate of like me using my voice, and like a lot of teachers too, like just like, you're so smart, but why don't you talk, and these kinds of things, and just kind of realizing that the power that my voice has, and has helped me grown into like more leadership type of roles. And I think that's one I'm still like to this day like actively trying to work on doing more. I think we can always like do more.
Yeah, our voices are so powerful. And I think a lot of the time, maybe because we don't put our own emphasis on them, and or we don't always put value in, because we've been taught to put our head down and work hard and do these types of things and good things will happen. And sometimes when you do put your head down and work hard and those things don't happen, we don't articulate like, hey, these are things that are important to me. And so just getting back to that space of finding our own voices. Genesis, is there a lesson that you'd like to bring up?
Yeah, I grew up around like almost the entirety of my mom's side of the family. So I grew up around a lot of cousins, and we grew up at my grandma's house. And so I think I learned at a very young age how to like manage different personalities and, like realize that different people have different styles, and how they work and communication. And so I think that's still something I think about a lot to this day. Like I remember being young and like trying to coordinate a game, or like we had like a cherry stand and trying to coordinate that with my cousins, and realizing at a very young age, like we all have very different styles, different personalities. And I think it's something, no matter where you work, you'll always come against, or you'll have to kind of work with. So I think that's the first one that came to mind, just the idea of like working with different personalities and that people have different styles.
So true, and so applicable to any workplace. Veronica?
I think for me, and I think this is for my family specifically, but I feel like it's also a cultural thing, is this like anything is possible kind of mentality that immigrants and children of immigrants have. I think sometimes I feel like people have told me like, oh, you're always optimistic, or you can kind of like just bounce back and push through. But I think I learned that from my parents. I mean, they came to this country with nothing and really were constantly like working hard and pushing ahead despite odds. And so I feel like I've taken that into like really everything that I do and my passion for life.
Yeah, and just in general, so grateful for the sacrifice that comes with that, and being able to look back and see, you know, for immediate family and for ancestors, you know, look how far we've come, and being able to get where we're at today. So I know for myself personally, I just feel so blessed. A lot of questions in the chat pod about, you know, hiring and recruiting. One question that came up is just, how do you feel you were able to stand out to actually get an interview in the first place? Is there any tips or tricks that you'd like to be able to point out in your own experience? And I guess we'll kick off with Genesis on this one. We'll go in reverse.
Yeah, this one's always a tough one for me to answer because I did go through very formal kind of MBA recruiting. So I applied through my MBA program. I got a first round interview, which I really enjoyed. And I think that was kind of the first time like, oh, I really like Adobe, because I just really enjoyed that 30-minute conversation. And then I had 2 additional interviews after that. But I think overall, I made sure I talked to folks that were at Adobe. So I leveraged my business school connections, some personal connections I had. I just did everything I could to kind of learn whether Adobe was a right fit for me, and if it was, why. And I think I tried to leverage that as much as I could when I was interviewing. Also, I think it doesn't like hurt to kind of do just some good old Google background, right? Like, what is Adobe doing? What are they excited about? What do you hear that we're talking about externally? And kind of be really intentional in the role that you want to play within Adobe and what skills it is that you want to bring. I think those are probably the few things I remember doing when I was applying, that I wanted to make sure I knew that Adobe was a right fit for me. And I think in that, I was able to also show to the other side kind of why I was a good fit for Adobe.
Yeah, in that process, you're really you're being interviewed, but you're the one that's making the decision of, hey, is this place a good fit for me too?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's always something to consider. And as someone who has interviewed folks, like, you feel it, right? Like, you feel when someone like is very excited for an opportunity at Adobe. And I think you see that in the information that they know and what they share, and how that correlates with kind of like how we spend our day.
No, definitely. I think that's a lesson we can all learn. Do either one of you want to also kick off on how you got your particular job opportunity, or what you felt made you stand out, or talk a little bit about your interview process?
I can touch on mine. I was connected with Adobe through Grace Hopper conference when it was still in person. It was like the career fairs. And then they had reached out before to they reached out to do like my first interview at the conference itself. And then I did my final rounds. And something that I think like stood out about Adobe is the amount of emphasis they put on like my past experiences and my projects and my resume, versus like just grinding me on like coding technical questions that a lot of like other companies do. In my final round, I only had like one technical question, versus the majority of the time was spent just going over my resume. So I think what stood me out was being able to have like projects that I could talk about. Like, I think the one I talked about was building the website for our Hispanic Engineers and Scientists Club on campus for Berkeley. So was able to talk about that. So I would say, in addition to like preparing for technical interviews, like doing leak codes and that kind of thing, also if you have a project that you can talk about, make sure you review that ahead of time before the interviews and are able to kind of speak passionately about it and more detailed.
I know one question that comes up a lot on the talent acquisition end, especially for technical interviews, is just around whiteboarding. Do you feel like you had to do tons of whiteboarding for, your particular position, or even, as somebody that's going into that manager track, do you think that was helpful, or any particular tips you could share there?
Yeah, no, I only had like one whiteboarding question for Adobe, and I know it can vary depending on, like when I was doing my interviews, I was interviewing directly with the team that I would eventually be on, so they could kind of structure their interview in the way that they saw fit. So I'm not sure if this would translate to like every team, but at least for mine, it wasn't intensive on technical at all. Like, yeah, and then for my screening round, like the first round, it's a lot of kind of terminology based questions, and we'll even do like coding problems, but you won't actually code them like by hand. You'll just kind of talk about your solution, which I find is like really interesting because you really get to see if someone can not only like do the work, but translate it in a way that if you're working with them day to day, like you could just have these conversations and it would make sense.
And you brought up a really good point that I think a lot of folks don't necessarily know about Adobe, is that with our, when you're interviewing, you're typically interviewing for the specific team that you're working for. I know that that's not the case with a lot of other companies where, if you're a software engineer, you might be going into a general software engineer pool. So you get a little bit more personal touch, if you will, on those interviews and can ask a little bit more about the specific team. And then Veronica, I know with marketing, it can be a little different.
Yeah, my kind of hiring, my path at Adobe was a little bit of a two-step process. I had met someone, and I guess this goes back to like networking or communities that we've talked about, because I'd met someone in my agency days that had gone to Adobe. And so it was kind of always in the back of my mind that I wanted to like reach out or make that connection. And so when I did, she actually happened to be going on a maternity leave and offered to have me interview for a contractor role, which was a little bit, I guess, nerve-wracking at the time to go from like a full-time job to like take a risk of a contract. But I was confident that I felt like it would open the door, or that I could actually get to know the company and if I liked it. And so I did that for a few months. And then I found an open role within Adobe during that time, which is a role or form of the role I work in today. And when I did that, I actually still had to interview, even though I'd already been working with the team. And I remember actually like using the product or making it part of my interview process to help tell my story and my background. And so I think that I'm hoping, I guess, helped me stand out in the way that I was interviewing, and not just talking about my experience, but being able to showcase how I use the product as well.
No, I think that Adobe has so many neat products. I know that I can't even get in touch with all of them, and I've been here for quite a few years. So definitely being able to demonstrate that there's some understanding of the product is a great tool as you go into the interview process. Another question that we received in the chat pod is just any insight that you can share on just empathy for the user when you're working on your particular product or project. And again, I know that this might not be, or everybody might not necessarily touch this one. I don't know if we want to go in reverse order. From a marketing perspective, how do we look at empathy for user experience?
I can start off, or I can speak to this. I think for us, and my focus is again on next gen products. So most people know Adobe for having creative pro tools like Photoshop and Illustrator, kind of heavier weight. But the focus on our side is what can we bring out for like the everyday creator and the everyday user. And it's a totally different audience to get to know. And we do a lot of testing and research to understand what a person needs to kind of feel that comfort and feel that the product is like accessible or approachable for them. A lot goes into that to make sure that when we are putting out the Adobe name, people aren't immediately intimidated. And so I think that's been an interesting process for me, is to like figure out what works, but then also to educate the company or the organization overall about how we want to bring those products to market.
Yeah, I think for me, customer empathy is more about just like the day-to-day, like how is this user interacting with our product, what's missing, what's bringing delight, and like, what's fun. And then making sure that that's reflected in our roadmap and how we're prioritizing work. I think there's always a balance around kind of what needs to be done from like a technological standpoint, right? Like you want to make sure you're building something that's sound and secure and like legally compliant and all this fun stuff. But I think there's also considering, you know, especially for Adobe and its creative tools, the side of the business I work on, like someone may be spending upwards of 8 to 10 hours in front of this, you know, like in front of this software any given hour. So how can we make them productive? How can we make them create amazing work that they're proud of? And that's something that's always at the core of, you know, any decision we make on the product side.
Yeah, I think that we also have a good understanding of the fact that we have a diversity of customers, and we need to be able to try to be able to meet each of their needs, right, in an equitable manner, but then also making sure that we're bringing that feedback into the introduction of that particular product. And I know that that's going to vary from product to product, but just making sure that we're, you know, continuing to keep that in mind. Still quite a bit of questions in the chat pod. I'm trying to get through them as much as possible. I know a lot of folks talk about just transitioning employment, you know, from place to place or whatnot. I know folks have shared kind of their career journey about transition. As far as being able to build that next opportunity, have any of you created your own job description or are in the process of being able to build something from a problem that you're identifying? And the answer can be no as well.
Not yet for me. Maybe someday. I think I happened to take a position that was needed. And so I just kind of stepped in and filled the role at the time. It's definitely evolved. I think there's creating your opportunity, but I think there's also evolving the opportunity that you're in as new needs and new projects come up, and kind of not being afraid to advocate for yourself and raise your hand. Especially if it's something that's new to you and you're excited about. So I think I've definitely been able to do that. I've been able to expand my scope, but I've never created kind of my own role or my own kind of job description per se.
I'll jump in because I think my role, the full-time role that I ended up taking at Adobe was actually like a first of its kind, or like first for that product. And the next gen products is something that we're building out overall. And I think something that's really interesting about Adobe that I didn't know before was that we actually do have a bit of our own like startups within Adobe. Like, yes, it's a big company, but there's actually little growth squads and groups that break out and try to figure out or problem solve for bigger things. And so the product that I've been working on was actually, or has been, more of a startup within Adobe, where it was kind of operating on its own, obviously with support from the larger company. And then now we're going to be like launching new products coming out of that. So I think it's exciting to be able to see that. And I think Adobe fosters that quite a bit. And so I look forward to doing more of that, I guess, while I'm here.
And what are some of the challenges that come up with being in, or even advantages of being a startup in a large company?
Some of the challenges, I think there's like pros and cons. I remember feeling one of the pros was almost like, having our own little group and being able to move faster because we were doing and making decisions on our own. But then sometimes also, like, I guess the con side of that would be like feeling like a little bit of an island, or not having that connection or support and that day-to-day on the outside, and thinking, but wait, we have a big company, or we have like a lot of marketing surfaces that we could do more with. And so I think that's probably one, is just kind of making sure that that you don't get too much like of an island or too focused in what you're doing, that you're not tapping into like the bigger ideas or learnings.
No, it's such a unique opportunity. And I think a lot of folks are interested in those types of things and want to take on those types of challenges. I do want to be cognizant of time here. We have about 10 minutes left. And so before I kick off to Ceci for closing, want to ask just one last question. Why are you proud to be a Latina in tech? And what are you excited about going into the next year?
I can kick us off. So, I mean, I'm proud to be a Latina always, but especially in tech. I think for me, it comes down to there are so few of us that I think like any opportunity I have to like share my opinion, you know, like share my point of view, not be afraid to kind of bring anything that that like kind of does come from my culture or my own upbringing. I think I always take those opportunities on with pride. They're a little uncomfortable sometimes, right? Like it's for me, I personally am still kind of learning how to be maybe one or two, you know, in the room and kind of having opinions that are maybe one or two out of a majority. But I think it's important, and I think at Adobe, especially, my peers, my teammates, my leadership have been super receptive to that, and I think that speaks volumes. But I think for me, it's about kind of having people see my face, see my name, hear my story, and kind of I hope that it kind of leads to greater opportunities for many more to join, not just Adobe, but the tech industry in general. I think my kind of data and Nielsen background always comes back to me because I'm like, we're such a growing segment. We love cell phones, like we live on them. So it's like there's so much about our community that like is very much embedded in tech. I don't think people think of that, but we're very early adopters, right? Like very early adopters of tech. And so I think any representation we can get where these decisions are being made, it makes sense from a social standpoint, it makes sense from a business standpoint. And I think I'm always more than happy to kind of sing that song and wave that flag like, hey, it's not just, it's social and that's of utmost importance, but like if you want to talk business, the business numbers are also there. So I think in general, like our perspective is needed as Latinas, as a larger community. So I'm always happy to kind of do anything I can.
No, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I resonate a lot with what Genesis said. So few of us, and I think what makes me proud is like looking back to like getting through college is like the part that I'm most proud of, like being the only Latina in my like giant CS classes and struggling a lot to like connect with peers, but still being able to do it is like really nice. And then now being able to do like these type of events, and I've done a lot of like speaking at schools, like my own schools and also just other schools, and just being able to give these kids like hopefully like a good role model is really fulfilling to me. Yeah, and then what I'm looking forward to for next year is just continuing to grow and especially grow into more leadership roles. Yeah, and going back into the office one day.
We'll get there. Thank you for sharing. And Veronica.
Yeah, I think they both said it so well. I think it's representation. It's bringing not only like the cultural, but the female perspective and ideas that I think is so important to the work that we do. And I think ultimately it's given me, I guess, kind of, I'm really proud to say that I, like, again, was the first in my family to graduate and really worked hard to be able to work for my dream company. And then to be able to give back to the community. I think there's so many people and programs that help me to get to where I'm at. And so being here now and being able to like give back, I think is huge for me and really important.
No, thank you, each of you, for sharing your journey and sharing your expertise and experience. I think there's a lot of folks that see a lot of your stories within their own stories, which just makes them excited to continue down their own career pathways because they see a lot of opportunity based off of each of your own paths. So thank you so much. And now I'm going to kick it off to Sexy for our closing.
I'm coming. Sorry. It's just, I always start with mute first, and then I forgot to turn my video on and then nobody hears me. But anyway, I just want to say that I am super, super inspired. I'm sure I'm reading the comments and I'm like, yes, with everyone. Thank you for sharing your stories. You all have a unique perspective, and I really feel like this is our future. This is what we've accomplished, that on the topics of family and culture, those really resonated with me as well. I mean, Latinas in Tech is here to try to do this work that we didn't have years ago. So I'm really just proud to be Latina. I'm answering the question too now. I'm proud to be Latina and to be here with all of you to represent and to work together to grow our hermanas, our sisters, our family. So thank you. And on the topic of university, students and enabling them to continue, we're also doing a program with Latinas in Tech University to try to, increase representation, increase Latinas going into CS roles, but not only CS roles, but also marketing and design and all the things. So, and offering those supports. So I'm really, really just proud to be here as part of this initiative and part of this work. Also, shout out to Adobe and shout out to all of the amazing programs. I love my creative cloud. If you guys ever do anything with podcasts, let me know, because I do have a podcast and I like to use different materials for it, but I love Creative Cloud. But anyway, this is the end of the show. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Thank you to our amazing panelists and Amanda too. Amanda, why don't you, before we close it, we still have a couple of minutes, why don't you tell us, your question, like that last question, like what makes you proud? Like why, just tell us your story too.
Yeah, I realized that I didn't really go through my story, and apologies. I know I was a last minute moderator, but I think for myself, my family had a lot of sacrifice. My mom was a teenage mother. I have 4 different brothers. We came from 3 different dads. And, on my mom's side of the family, I was just the second one to graduate high school, let alone college, let alone my master's degree. So I just feel super grateful that I have been afforded a lot of opportunities because of folks that have taken the time out to really grow and nourish me. And a lot of the time that manifests in imposter syndrome and feeling like I didn't necessarily belong here, or even being somebody that is mixed race, getting imposter syndrome of not feeling like I belong in certain communities, but then continuing to just, own my own space and be respectful of, other folks' space. And I think why I'm so proud is just, I feel like the community has, continued to take me in time and time again and provide me with the resources to be successful in where I'm at today. So what I'm excited about for fiscal year 2022 is that, managing our diversity talent acquisition team, we're going to be really focused and making a concerted effort to bring lots of new folks into the company. Adobe's doing a lot of really great things, but that doesn't mean that we don't have opportunity to learn and grow. So thank you, Ceci.
Of course. Well, thank you for sharing that story. I feel like everybody should be sharing their stories, especially in these areas. But yes, so thank you so much for everyone. We will have the recording after. We'll go through it and put it on the Latinas in Tech website for anyone interested. Make sure that you register on the Latinas in Tech website, and you can just, if you're an ally or a recruiter or just a Latina in Tech, feel free to register. We're never going to charge. It's always going to be free. All right, and with that, thank you all. Have a great rest of your day, and go kick some butt. All right, bye-bye.